Welcome back to another video. If you like these kinds of topics, though they do change from time to time, please consider subscribing. What I'm here to do is essentially talk to men about what men need to know, particularly young men, particularly my son, who might stumble upon this YouTube channel when he's older. And if his dad isn't around, I want him to know what my thoughts and ideas were. Anyway, this is another book review on one of the 5 Christian books I read in the last year. I want to talk about Box Day's The Irrational Atheist. It's actually a very good book. It introduces some awesome concepts. It introduces a few ideas from Mere Christianity, which is my favorite of the books, which I'll do at the end of the 5. And I do have some critical thoughts for Box. It's just my personal preference, but I found the book a little bit hard to read and get into at first. The reason being, personal. I think it's written very well. In fact, the whole book is essentially arguments against who he calls the Four Horsemen. I think I'm going to forget one of them, but it's Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and there's another one, and I don't remember who it is, but essentially the mainstream atheists who always get free airtime to tell us American Christians how stupid our religion is, with no one there on the other side of the table debating against them. Those guys. I think Dawkins himself and Sam Harris have probably been on Real Time with Bill Maher a million times, with no one there to argue against them. But yeah, I think if you yourself are an atheist or agnostic or not sure, and you're starting to look at Christianity, you might want to start with this, particularly if you come from that background of having heard Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris say how stupid Christianity is time and time again. Because Box Day takes every one of their important arguments and turns them into shit and shows you how hypocritical and stupid they are. And I commend Box for doing that. I think my personal problem with his book is that I got a little tired of it. He really does deconstruct every single one of the arguments. So for me, I had just read Philoto's Believe, which I did a video on recently, and I was kind of hoping for more of that style of a book, a more energizing book, like a morale booster. And it was a little bit of that, don't get me wrong, but it was really analytical. Probably a little bit more analytical for my taste, but definitely still a solid book for most everyone else who reads it. I just probably don't have the greatest attention span. I'll just admit it. I do want to point to the end of the book, though. At a certain point, Vox stops talking about the arguments against the Four Horsemen, and he does talk about a little bit about what he thinks Christianity is. He pulls a little bit from Mere Christianity as his inspiration. But I just love how Vox shares that, Christianity is essentially compatible with, I guess you want to call it, simulation theory. Whatever the theory is called, where we are all in a video game or simulation of its own. God is the game master or game maker. We are his characters. And a devious little hacker called Satan got into the program and turned us all into shit. And God is doing everything he can to save us, and eventually comes to the point and realizes that he can do so with Christ, the based salvation merchant. And sends Christ into the program and essentially saves us all. I love that theory. It is amazing. You could talk to Vox himself about it on his dark stream, which he does on YouTube live. I think at this point, he does it every 2 or 3 days. It used to be a nightly, but he's a little bit too busy with other works. But you can send him a super chat and he will be happy to talk about it. I myself have talked to him a few times, or I should say, had him read my questions. But yeah, I think this book is amazing. Highly recommend it, particularly if you're like me and you live with people who, I don't live with them anymore, but your family, your immediate family is people who are getting all their gospel from the New York Times, as well as people like Harrison, Hitchens, and Dawkins. You can smash their arguments pretty easily if you become well-versed in this book. That's it. That's all I got today, and I appreciate you listening.